Hi Grade 12s, welcome to today's session, Maths Lit. My name is Hayley and I'm going to be taking you through the session on financial calculations. So finance, very, very important, and we're going to go through some questions from last year's paper and hopefully we'll cover quite a bit. So first let's go through a checklist that you need to go through yourselves to make sure that you can actually answer all these types of questions. And today's session I'm going to go through some of them, unfortunately not all, and that's what happens with the paper. You know, we focus so much on finance and all the calculations related to finance, but it doesn't always mean that those questions are going to come up in your paper. So you'll see whatever came up in this paper from 2011, but I can't guarantee that it'll happen for you. So you need to be able to do all of these. So let's see. So make sure that you can. Right, what do we need to do? We need to be able to explain and apply the terms income, expenditure, profit, and loss. Right, income is the amount of money coming in to a business or an individual. Expense is how much does it cost that business or individual to do what they're doing. Profit is clearly just income minus expense, and if we have a positive value, then it's a profit, and if we have a negative value, it's a loss. Right, then we need to be able to perform tax calculations. These include for VAT, and remember your VAT is always 14%. They do give that to you in your exam, so you don't have to stress about it too much. But we need to be able to calculate a VAT amount. We need to be able to minus VAT. We need to be able to increase by VAT. We need to be able to work out personal income tax given a tax table. And it's really important that you can read and understand a tax table. So if we don't do one today, go and try find one and practice. Because the best thing is, practice kind of makes perfect. Right, and we then need to be able to calculate simple and compound interest when given the formula. And don't stress about this because you're always going to be given every formula that you need. So we need to be able to apply the formulas and we need to be able to manipulate the formulas. But I think I do have a compound interest question for you today. So should we go ahead and see what questions we've got? Right, let's start with question 1. So question 1 has been adapted from, like I said to you, the November 2011 paper 1, and it's actually question 1.2.1 and 1.2.2. So we're going to start with this question. What I like to do is always read through the question, try and understand everything that they've given you, and then go ahead and answer it. And guys, while I'm just discussing this quickly, remember you've got 10 minutes to do your reading time. When you're reading, decide which questions you want to answer first, because you definitely don't have to go in order. So let's read this question. A South African couple recently visited Botswana and Zambia. The table below shows the exchange rate between currencies for the two countries and the South African rand. And the South African rand is ZAR. So whenever we've got a table, I like to fully understand what the table means. So the table says it's the South African rand to foreign currency. We've got 1 South African rand is equal to 0.95 Botswana pula. And there's your simplification for the Botswana pula. And then we've got the next thing is 1 rand, again a South African rand, is equal to 681.07 Zambian kwacha. And that's how they simplify that. The couple budgeted to pay 20 rand per person for lunch. How much is this amount in Botswana pula? Well, first thing we need to do is see that they have got quite a few things hidden in this question. 20 rand per person. Now it's a couple. So how many people make up a couple? Well, there's 2 people. So they are needing to budget 20 rand each for lunch. So in actual fact, they are budgeting 40 rand for lunch. Now our question is, how much does this amount to in the Botswana pula? So go back to our question and we see here, let's change colors here. We're looking at that there. And I'm going to write exactly what I know. I know that 1 rand is equal to 0.95 of these Botswana pula. Now what my question is, I need to budget 40 rand. So how much is that in Botswanan money? So this is a ratio. Now you see we've got dealing with finance, but all of a sudden we got ratio, and things so often intermingle. So we need to see, what did we do from 1 to get to 40? Well, clearly here, let's change our color again, we multiplied by 40. So we're going to do the exact same thing on that side. We're going to times by 40. And we're going to get our answer. So we're going to say 40 times by 0.95. And we're going to get our answer. So let's get our calculator out. And we've got 40 times by 0.95. Always check your calculator that you're actually entering what you want. And we see that that's 38. So go back to that. That is 38. And it's the Botswana Pula. Now, when you're answering this type of question, I know that a lot of you out there don't see it as a ratio. And we know we need to multiply or divide. And we're never really sure whether we must multiply or divide. So I want you to make sense of the answer. I'm getting a number that is less than my rands. Does that make sense? If I look at my original here, I had the Botswana was less than the South African rand. So I'm expecting an answer that's less. If I get an answer that's more, then I've probably divided instead of multiplying, or multiplied instead of divided. So always check your answer. Does it make sense? Okay, let's move on to the next part of the question. Right, we've got our couple. The accommodation in Zambia costs them 360,286 Zambian kwacha per couple per day. Now this is for the couple, but it's per day. They paid a deposit of 1,221,605 to secure their accommodation. Dinner cost them 85,134 per person, and they both had dinner at the hotel restaurant 4 times. And remember, this was per person. So we're dealing with per couple, per person, and we've got to keep track of what's actually occurring and how much they're actually paying. But look how wonderful these examiners are. They've given us a formula to calculate the total amount they'll pay at the end of the 10-day stay in Zambia. So let's read our formula. The total amount due, that's what we're being asked. So we need to calculate the total amount due, is equal to the number of days times A plus 8 times B minus C. So we need to work out what each one of those things is. So A is the accommodation cost. Does that make sense? That's the number of days times the accommodation per couple. So let's write in that amount. We're paying, the accommodation cost them 360. So I'm going to write that here. 360,286. And that was the Zambian kwacha. Per couple, per day. So that's for both of them. The number of days, we're going to read this further, and we see that they stayed for 10 days. So my number of days, I'm going to actually put a 10 there. So if I carry on annotating and I'm putting all these numbers where it's important for me, it makes it easier to actually complete the question. So I always label things as I go along. Right, the cost per dinner. Now, when we do our cost per dinner, what did we read here? They paid a deposit. Okay, dinner cost them 85,134 per person, and they both had dinner at the hotel restaurant 4 times. So in our equation, we had this 8. That 8 is because they had dinner 4 times. So that 8 is actually 4 dinners, and there was per person. So it was times 2. So let's write in our dinner cost was 85,134. And the deposit paid, finally, they paid the deposit, and let's just write that number in. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. Right, that was 102,605. Now that I've got all my values, it's going to be very easy for me to complete the equation. So let's find a little bit of space, and let's change our colors. Right, so we have our total cost is equal to, now I'm going to open the bracket, the number of days we said was 10, times the accommodation per day was 360,286. Plus, there's another bracket. I'm going to write it exactly the way they've given it to me. 8 times my cost per dinner was 85,134 minus my deposit of 102,605. Now what I can do is I can do this all in one step on my calculator, because the scientific calculator is wonderful in that respect. So brackets and everything, we can just type it in straight to the calculator. But I think for now I'm going to do it in stages, just so that we can double check everything makes sense. So first of all, I'm going to say 10 times by 360,286. I don't think I needed a calculator for that. So that was 3,602,860 plus, do you need a calculator for this one, 8 times by 85,134, 681,072, 681,072 minus my deposit. So to this value that I've already got, which is my middle bracket, I'm going to add the first bracket, 3,602,860. I always like to press the equals in between. You don't have to, your calculator will do this for you fine. But remember BODMAS, so I tend to press equals, and then I'm going to minus my deposit of 102,605. Check the numbers, especially if they're big numbers, as you're entering them. Right, and what have we got? We've got 3,262,000. Let's get a 327. And don't forget your units. Now this was, we were dealing with Zambian, that's ZMK. And if you'd like, you can actually say the Zambian kwacha. So that is our final answer. Now go back and reread the question. It's a good habit to get into, to make sure that you've actually answered what they're asking. And we're going to do that now. So it said use the formula below to calculate the total amount they will pay at the end of their 10-day stay in the hotel in Zambia. So we've got our answer, and that is all they're asking. But I actually think this is such a nice big number, I'd like to know what that actually is in rands. So I know the question doesn't ask for it, but let's go check. In our last question, we had our conversions. So we had 681,07 per 1 rand. So 681,07, I want to write that in here. So 681,07, that was the Zambian kwacha to 1 rand. And I want to know what that 3,262,327 actually relates to in rands. So what do I need to do? From there to there, I need to divide the two. So I'm actually going to say my amount, 3,262,327, and I'm going to divide it by 681,07 to get how many rands that is. So I've got my answer on my calculator already, so I'm going to divide it by 681,07, and I see that it's 4,790 rand. So that is in rands, 4,790 rand. Isn't that quite interesting? And it works out to millions in Zambia. So you can be a millionaire there quite easily. Guys, you know what? I think it's time for us to take a little bit of a break. Go get stretched, go get something to drink, but hurry back. Let's carry on with finance. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back, grade 12s. I hope you had a good break. I hope you managed to stretch, maybe get something to eat quickly. Let's carry on with our finance. So we're going to move on to question 2. So question 2 has been adapted from the November 2011 paper 1 again, and we're now dealing with question 3.1. So this question involves Zoe is a university student. Her parents give her a monthly allowance of 2,500 rand to cover her expenses, which consist of the following. So Zoe's expenses include a monthly cell phone payment, so she's got her cell phone, a total monthly installment of 400 Rand for 2 clothing stores. Clearly she shops at these 2 stores, so it's Teen Craze and Fab Fashion. She pays 400 Rand for both of them. A daily cost of 25 Rand for food, 110 Rand per weekend for entertainment, and transport costs of 125 Rand per week. There's a lot of information in there. And I know that you guys often see this kind of information and think, well, I don't know where to start. So I want you to not panic. First of all, never panic. Take it one step at a time. So let's read through the question and see what they actually want us to do. So we've got the table 1 below shows Zoe's budget for April. Now, what's important to note about Zoe's budget is that we're dealing with a month that has 30 days. Because here we had food that was a daily cost. So I'm just keeping that in the back of my mind, that April's got 30 days. Her budget for April, and let's see what her budget is. We've got monthly cell phone payment of 240 Rand, Teen Craze account of 210 Rand. We've got our Fab Fashion account, which we don't know, we're going to have to calculate. Food for the month, need to calculate. Weekend entertainment for 4 weeks, we're going to calculate that, and transport for the 4 weeks. And then they give us the total. And what's really nice about a question like this, when they give you the total, is that if you've got this correct, you know it's correct because you get to the same total that they do. So if you've made a mistake and you don't get to that total, then you know you need to go correct something. So let's do this one step at a time. The question says calculate the missing amounts of A, B, C, and D. Right, so we're going to start off with A. What is A? A is this Fab Fashion account. Now, in our reading, I remember reading something about the accounts. She had a total monthly installment of 400 Rand for the 2 clothing stores. Now we know what she pays for the one. For Teen Craze, she pays 210. So clearly the balance of the 400 Rand is actually what she pays for A. So 400 Rand for the 2 stores, minus what she pays at the first store, which was at 210, will give us A. And we've got 400 minus 210, and it's 190 Rand. So she pays 190 Rand there. So that's 190. I'm going to write it into my table because then I'm going to add them to double check everything. So B, we want food for the month. How much? She had a daily cost of 25 Rand for food. So we are dealing with 25 Rand per day. And remember I said to you, we're dealing with April, and how many days are in April? There are 30 days in April. So we need to work that out. 25 times 30 days, and we see that's 750 Rand. $750, and again I'm going to write it in here. Weekend entertainment for 4 weeks. So let's go back to our calculation. We had weekend entertainment 110 Rand per weekend. So we want our calculations, let's do yellow now. C is 4 weekends at 110 Rand per weekend. 4 times by 110 is 440 Rand. And then we write this in here, 440 Rand. Now remember, whenever you're doing these calculations, and especially if they're like simple calculations where we're just multiplying something by 4, don't just give me an answer. Always show us all you're working out, because there could be some mistake along the way that you've made, possibly typed in the wrong number on your calculator, but you will get method marks even if something is incorrect. So you must ensure that your examiner knows exactly what you're thinking all along. So always write out all your calculations. You can see that I've written out every step. Okay, and D, we've got transport again for 4 weeks, Right, let's see what colour haven't we used. Let's use our green. Transport for 4 weeks. So we're going to do D. We've got 4 weeks. And how much was the transport? Transport for 4 weeks. Our transport cost of 125 Rand per week. So we're making that 4 times 125. And we get our answer to that in our calculator. 4 times by 125. And you'll also notice that I use the calculator quite a lot. I always seem to check these things. I know how to add and multiply a lot of these numbers in my head, but I like to check things on the calculator. But you never know, especially when you're thinking and you're stressed in an exam situation, you tend to leave off zeros or do silly little things. Rather use your calculator. Make your calculator your best friend. And even if you have to multiply 2 times 4, it doesn't matter. You've got the calculator there, so use it. Okay, so back to this. We said this was 500 Rand. And I'm going to write that in here. Now that we've got this all nice and colourful, I'm going to double check that this all adds up correctly. So I've got 240 plus 210 plus 190 plus 750 plus 440 plus 500 and get an answer of 2330. And now I know, okay, now I can move my calculator back. Now I know that all my calculations that I've done here are correct. And what's wonderful is that I've guaranteed these 8 points. I'm guaranteed these 8 marks because I got the same answer that they did. But if you get a different answer, don't panic. Just go back and see where you've kind of made the mistake. Right, let's move on to our next part of the question. So we've got her university, we've got all our calculations. Calculate the difference between her allowance and her total expenses for the month. Now, her allowance, if we go back to our text, her allowance was 2,500 Rand per month. So we want the difference between these two. So we have our allowance of 2,500 minus her expenses of 2,330. And this is another important fact. If you have got a different answer to this 2330 and you couldn't find your mistake, then don't panic about that. But when you do the next part of the sum, you have to assume that you received that calculation, that you ended up with 2330. So don't carry your mistake forward if they've given you an answer. So let's do this on our calculator. So we've got 2,500 minus 2,330, and we get 170 Rand. So that is the difference between her expenses and her allowance. Let's move on to the next part of the question. Zoe needs 200 Rand to go on a university excursion. Name one possible way in which she can reduce her monthly expenditure so that she will have enough money for the excursion. So now what is important is that she needs 200 Rand. Okay? And in actual fact, how short is she? We know that she already has 170 Rand over. So we know that at the end of the month she still has 170 Rand, well, in this particular month. So she's only short of 30 Rand. So we need to find somewhere in her expenses that she can cut down by 30 Rand. So it's not a huge amount of money that we're looking for, and we're not looking for the full 200 Rand. Now what's really nice about these kind of questions, grade 12s, is that it's your opinion. And as long as you can justify your opinion, it's very hard for your examiner to mark you wrong. So let's see where she can cut down. Her monthly cell phone payment, she might be able to cut down, but not in that particular month. She's already spent the 240 Rand, so she can't pay them less. Otherwise, they might cut off her phone. Her accounts as well, that 400 Rand of her accounts, she probably has to pay those as installments every month. So I don't think she'll be able to cut down. And in future, maybe she can cut down the amount that she spends on clothing. Food for the month. Now, there's one place that she probably can cut down. And remember, she's only trying to cut down 30 Rand. So we were spending 750 Rand on foods. I'm sure she could cut that down at just by 30 Rand and spend a little bit less on food. The other place she could definitely cut down is her weekend entertainment. The weekend entertainment worked out to, that was 440 Rand. Well, I'd say she can definitely stay home one day on the weekend. So rather than spending that 110 Rand in one weekend, she can definitely cut down here. So that would be a really good way to cut. And finally, transport for 4 weeks. Well, we don't know where she lives. We don't know how far she is from university. So her transport of 125 Rand per week might include petrol. It might be getting a bus or a taxi. We don't know that. And we can't say cut down on transport because we don't know if she's close enough to actually walk. And we can't assume that. So I'd say the two places that we can cut down is food for the month and her weekend entertainment. But again, if you did tell me that you could cut down in transport and she would walk somewhere, it's very hard for me to mark that wrong. So as long as you can justify it with a reason why that she would cut down. So those are the kind of questions that are really nice, easy marks. We're going to cut down on entertainment. That's what we're going to say. All right, let's move on to the next question, in fact. Still dealing with Zoe. And this is now question 3.2 from the November 2011, still the paper one. So, Zoe will be a student at university for 4 years. Analysts have predicted that transport costs will increase at a compound interest rate of 8% per annum. Calculate how much she will need to budget for her weekly transport in April 2014. So, what we need to do is we need to, first of all, we need to go back to the last question because it's based on her transport costs. So the transport costs here were 125 Rand per week. So we are dealing with 125 Rand per week. Right. They've given us the formula. We've got A equals to P, open brackets, 1 plus R to the power of N. So that is our compound interest formula. We need to be able to apply this compound interest formula. Now, what I tell my kids that I teach, I say to them, you know what, always write out these A, P, I, and N. If you write them out in your exam book, you actually are so much easier for you to fill in the numbers and to get it correct. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to say, well, okay, I've got A, I've got P, I've got I, and I've got N. Right, what am I looking for? I'm looking for how much the petrol is going to cost me in a few years' time. So I'm looking for my final amount. I have my initial amount. My initial amount is how much is it costing me now for transport, or how much is it costing Zoe now for transport. My interest rate, we said, was 8%, and I'm going to come back to this 8%. And then finally, we need to know, well, how many years? So we wanted in April 2014. Now, when we were doing this last thing was April 2011. So how many years is that? 2011 to 2014 is going to give us 4 years. Right, so it's 4 years. So why did I say 4 years? I went 2011 to 2012. That's one. That's actually 3 years. To 2 to 3 years. 3 years' time. This four was worrying me because it said she's at varsity for 4 years. So that's where my 4 was. I was thinking I need a 4 there. But in actual fact, from 2014 to 2011 is only 3 years. Okay, so let's go back to our calculations. When we have an interest rate, we always need to write it as the amount per compound period. So I need to check first a few things. Her compound period is, interest rate is compounded per annum, which means that it's compounded once a year. So my compound period is only once. Okay. So my 8%, I am going to change into a decimal. So I'm going to make that 8 over 100. I find it far easier to actually work with a decimal, and I can actually write it as 0,08. And my 3 years compounded once a year, so it basically becomes 3 times 1, so it remains 3. So let us now write out our formula. So we've got A equals to P, and I'll always write out the formula first, to the power of n. I've got 125, open my bracket, 1 plus my interest rate as a decimal to the power of 3. And now get out our calculator, and we've got 125, open our brackets, 1 plus 0,08, close the brackets, to the power of 3. And we get our answer of 157 Rand 46. 157 Rand and 46 cents. Now remember, it's money, so it always needs to be 2 decimal places, and we're expecting a number that's bigger. We've got a number that's bigger. So those are the kind of things you need to look out for. And what you need to look out for as well is your compound period. So I'm just going to redo this question. Now with interest, we would never have interest compounded more than once a year. But I want to just show you quickly if I had to take another example. So I'm just going to do another example. Okay, and let's say we had, let's take 125 Rand, but now we're investing it, and let's do our 8% again, and we're going to compound it this time, compounded monthly. Okay, we're going to compound it monthly, and we're going to invest it for 3 years. Just want to show you the difference in these calculations. So again, I'm going to write out my A, P, I, and N. Okay, so my principal was 125 Rand. My interest was 8%, which I change to 8 over 100, or 0,08, but I need to divide this by how many times it's compounded. So this is compounded monthly, which means my compound period is 12. So I'm going to divide that by 12. And finally, my N also changes to the compound period, so it becomes 3 times 12, which is in actual fact 36. So on my calculator, I'm going to type this in as A equals 125, 1 plus, and I'm going to leave that as a fraction, 0.8 over 12 to the power of 36. And let's do that on our calculator just to see the difference. Open bracket, 1 plus, and I'm going to use my fraction button, 0,08 divided by the compound periods, close my bracket, to the power of 36, and I see that it's 158 Rand 78. So in this case, we've got 158 Rand 78. So can you see that it's slightly different to what we had originally? That was 157. And I think maybe on that note, I think it might be time to take a little bit of a stretch and a break. So guys, go off and get something to eat, but hurry back so we can carry on with our last session of finance. I'll see you soon. Hi grade 12s, and welcome back. I hope that you managed to stretch and kind of get a little bit of blood flowing in your legs, and that you are ready for our last session now in finance. So let's go through the next question. Right, we're dealing with question 4 today, but this is adapted again from the November 2011 paper. But now we're dealing with paper 2, and it's question 2.1 and 2.3. So let us read the question. Miss Vermaas had an accident with her bakkie. The left rear end of the vehicle was hit, resulting in damage to the bumper and the tailgate. Below are pictures of the damage to Miss Vermaas's bakkie. Now, for all you ladies out there who are thinking, what is a tailgate? You know what? It's not important if we don't always understand exactly what they're talking about. In this case, they give us pictures, so it's quite nice. So our tailgate, there's our damage, and the bumper is an enlarged. So okay, this is the left the left rear end of the bakkie, showing the tailgate, and the enlarged picture of the damaged bumper. So they give us pictures which are really nice. She obtained quotes from 3 panel beaters. She went to Gales panel beaters, TBOS panel beaters, and Dong's panel beaters for the repair of the damage to the bakkie. Each of the quotations summarized on the following page, so that's going to be important, and we're going to go through that in a lot of detail, lists the parts to be replaced, repair work, and paint work. The quotations exclude 14% VAT, which is your value added tax. An additional amount has to be added to each quote for sundries and consumables. Sundries are your administrative costs, like telephone calls made to clients and suppliers, and consumables are your cleaning materials. So clearly these panel beaters are charging the client for absolutely everything. When they make a phone call on your behalf, they're going to charge you for that. Right, let's go through the quotes. So this is the summary of the quotation from the panel beaters. Now, it's really important that we've got a lot of information here. It's important that we go through the quotes quite carefully, and this is what I want you to do when you get your papers. So we're looking at the summaries from the panel beaters. The first one we're going to do is Gales panel beaters. And we've now got, right, method, parts and descriptions, price in rand, and then we've got labor costs. So what have we got? Parts and description. We need to strip and assemble. They need to paint the rear bumper. They're going to replace the tailgate, and there's the cost. They're going to replace the left rear bumper and the cost, the bumper end and the cost, the center bumper rubber. So for all those things that they're going to replace, the cost is 6,599 Rand 53. So that is just for the parts. Then we go on to the labor costs. Right. To paint spray, it's going to take 1 hour, and the total in rand is 850 Rand. To strip and assemble, they're going to use 3.75 hours, or 3 3/4 hours, and the total cost is 750. Now, if I add those two costs up, we'll see that I get a total of 1,600 Rand. So clearly her total quotation is for the parts plus the labor. And remember, this was all excluding VAT. So they're going to charge us VAT on that. Let's do the next one. TBO's panel beaters. Right. They needed the repair area, a tow bar cover, tow bar center step, a tow bar end, and those are the price. And the total costs were 1,657, which is quite a big difference between these two amounts if we look above. But now their labor, painting an hour is costing 1,000 Rand, and then they're going to use 2.5 hours and 400 Rand. That's going to be strip and assemble, and then to repair, it's going to take them 5 hours at 800 Rand and 3.75 at 600 Rand. So their total labor costs are much higher, 2,800 Rand. So they are spending a lot more hours working than the first panel beaters. And finally, we've got Dong's panel beaters, where again they've got the tailgate badge, rear bumper and tow hitch, and our parts are even more expensive than the first one. So we've got parts for 8,689 Rand, and then what did that cost them? 2 hours to paint, a total of 1,800. They work for 3.5 hours, 700 Rand, so a total of 2,500 Rand for labor costs. So those are all the quotes that she has received, and now we're going to answer the questions and see what kind of questions we answer. Right. So use the summary of the quotations to answer the following questions. Without doing any calculations, Ms. Vermaas stated that Dong's panel beaters charges the lowest hourly rate to strip and assemble the bakkie. Verify showing all the calculations whether her statement is correct. So we need to show all calculations, and it's important that whenever we do any verification, whether we agree or disagree with what she says, we need to show it mathematically. So what I would really like to do is work out the cost per company and see if Dongs is correct. So let's do the calculation first and then come back to her statement. So going back to our quote, right, we are looking at the strip and assemble. So our Gales was 3,75 hours at 750 Rand. So let's write that in. So we've got Gales, and they charged for 3,75 hours. They charged, I think it was 700 Rand. I'm going to go double check that. 750 Rand. Sorry, let's change that. 750 Rand. Right, the next panel beater, I'm going to leave a little bit of space to do some calculations. The next panel beater was this TBOS, and they had right, they had 3 different amounts: strip and assemble and repair work. So I think the best thing to do here is actually to add up all of these hours and add up all of the rands and work out an average per hour. So they had 3.75 plus 5 plus 2.5 hours, and that was a total of, let's double check those numbers, 2.5, 5, 3.75, for 1,800 Rand. And finally, let's go back to the one that she's actually talking about, was Dongs, and it's 3.5 hours for 700. Was 3.5 hours for 700 Rand. Okay, so now what we need to do is actually do the calculation and work out the cost per hour for each one of these. So what we're going to do is, let's find our pink. We're going to take our 750, that's not pink. We're going to take our 750 and we're going to divide it by 3.75, okay, and get an answer for that. So it was 750 divided by 3.75, and we get 200 Rand per hour. That was 200 Rand per hour. Then I'm going to add up all of these. So I've got 7.5, 10. Let's do this on the calculator. This is where I say the calculator always makes it easier. 3,75 plus 5 plus 2.5. Okay, and we get 11.25. So here we need an orange. We're going to divide this by 11.25. Now on my calculator I've already got my 11.25. So all I need to do is take my 1,800 and divide that by my answer, and I get 160 Rand per hour. £160 per hour. And finally, with our green, we're going to divide this by 3,5. So we got 700 divided by 3.5, and we get 200 Rand per hour. So 200 Rand per hour. Now let's go back to her statement. So she said, without doing any calculations, she stated that Dongs panel beater charges the lowest hourly rate. Now she wasn't looking at the lowest total that they charge, but the lowest hourly rate to strip and assemble a bakkie. So showing all the calculations whether her statement is correct. And in actual fact, what we've found is we have found that they're charging 200 Rand per hour, which is the same as what Gale's charging, but our other one, and I'm going to go back to the statement, they are charging the lowest amount per hour. Okay, they're charging on average of 160 Rand per hour. So this is in actual fact the lowest hourly rate, but there are so many more hours. But what did her statement say? Her statement said that they're charging the lowest hourly rate. So therefore we say, we need to answer it. Therefore, she is not correct. She is incorrect. Okay, as there is 160 Rand is cheaper, per hour is cheaper. Okay, so go back, reread the question and make sure that you've answered the question correctly. We've shown all our calculations, we've done that. Have we answered whether she's correct or incorrect? We've done that. So I think that we've got those marks, and let's move on to the next part of the question. Right, so now we're dealing with 4.1.2. Gales Panabeater quoted a final total amount of R9,497.93. That's including VAT, which included the amount charged for sundries and consumables. Calculate the amount excluding VAT charged for sundries and consumables. So what we need to do is we need to work out what our VAT amount was. So we're going to take this answer, right? So what we have is for Gales, we pay a total of 9497.93, and that's including VAT. So we need to exclude our VAT because we know how much Gales charged us. So if we can minus the VAT, we're going to get our total, and then we can see how much is charged for sundries and consumables. So the first thing I need to do is calculate this. So how do I do that? And remember, right in the beginning I said you need to be able to go backwards and work out the VAT amount. So what I actually have is I have our original, which I'm not sure what that is, and I'm going to add VAT. Now when I add VAT, or when I add a percentage, I like to say multiply by 100% plus the 14% of VAT. So I'm actually going to say, well, my original that I had, which I don't know what that is yet, times by 114% is going to give me the total amount with VAT, 9497.93. Once I've written the statement like this, now I can work out what that original amount is, because what I need to do is get original on its own. So I'm going to divide by 114% because those clearly cancel, and I'm going to divide it on this side as well. So my original that I had is equal to, let's get that number in, 94, I don't remember what that is, 97.93 divided by 114%. That's going to give me the amount excluding VAT. So it's 8331,52. 8331,52. So now we're going to go back and we're going to see what the quote amount was, and we're going to compare this original that we've worked out minus the VAT and the original quote. So let's go back to our quote, and our quote amount was, right, so now we get our calculator out at a 6599,53 plus the 1600. So on our calculator, type in 6599.53 plus our labor costs of 1600, and we get an answer of 819953. So let's go back to the question, and we can now write that in as our quote amount, and that was, let's go back to the calculator, 8199,53. 8199,53. So now if we look at these two values, what we were quoted was one amount, and what we paid excluding VAT was a different amount. So clearly the difference between these two is the sundries and that other thing that they were asking us, the sundries and consumables. So, and we're looking for this excluding VAT. So what's important is these numbers are excluding VAT. So all we need to do now is we need to say, well, our sundries plus our consumables is going to be equal to, well, what are we paying? We're paying this 8331,52 minus what we were quoted of 8199,53. So the balance is our sundries and consumable. So on our calculator, I've got that number in. So I'm going to say 8331,52 minus that answer and get an amount of 131 Rand 99. So what do they pay? It's 131 Rand 99. So that's what we pay in sundries and consumables. Now, as I'm finishing off this question, it occurs to me that we could have actually done this calculation in a different way. And what we could have done is we could have taken our quote amount and we could have, let me just write it out quickly. So we could have taken our quote amount, which we had calculated. We could have added VAT. And then we could have minused the amount that we had paid. Which is a different way of calculating. And I always say to my kids, you know what? There are more than one way of doing something. There's more than one way of getting the answer. But as long as you show every step what you are doing and your examiner can follow, then they can allocate marks for what you've done. So that's an important fact to remember, that two friends might be sitting together and actually going through a past paper and do things in different ways. But you should get the same answer. And I hope that's the fact. That's what happens. Okay, so now that takes us to the end of our questions. So I hope that you've actually enjoyed this session on finance. And if I can just give you a few hints. One is read the question carefully. Go back and reread the question once you've done your calculation. Make sure that you've answered exactly what they are asking. Don't panic when it comes to finance. They very often give you the formula and you need to be able to apply the formula, so practice makes perfect. And another thing that's really important, don't use a new calculator for the exam. Use the calculator that you've been using for revision and for practice, because you need to be able to use the calculator that you have. So if you're going to get a new calculator for the exam, get it now so that you've got an opportunity to practice with it. And guys, I hope that you've enjoyed today. I hope to see you again soon. And if I don't, good luck for your exams. And I'm going to say goodbye now. Bye.